Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're getting into some horrifying Reddit horror stories. Since you guys always seem to enjoy these, I've made this video super long, so if you want to see more long-form content in the future, let me know in the comments. I truly appreciate you stopping by. It means the world. Before we dive in, please like the video, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram. Today's stories are terrifying, weird, and, as the title says, absolutely horrifying. You'll definitely want to stick around for this. Without further ado, let's get into it. My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. Have you considered that maybe that's not your wife and it's some eldritch horror pretending to be her? My wife, Lynn, and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea. And that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird, and just totally out of character for her, like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of Oja in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed, I'll admit it, not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason at that moment I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she really was asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again. From over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time. So I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that, the sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth was she doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long, dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. "What the fuck, Lynn?" I snapped. "This shit is getting really fucking annoying." I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet I wondered if I heard it at all. and then complete silence. "Lynn," I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. "I swear to God, just fucking stop it," I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before. But there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door, as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I'd wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I'd had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. "Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home," I shouted. "Now." She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs. As if Lynn could hear them from her place outside, her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I'd dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she'd sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. "Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home." And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home. How worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled, like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation. But if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully, I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife. But how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually, as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No. She just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no. Just said to let you sleep, she said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. No, she looked awful though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting, but this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even, like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed, so I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to. Yes? She answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior, or possibly any mental health issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking, or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well, I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me, she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn. I tried. I heard a faint shaky intake of breath, as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together, but failing. Marianne, I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up, until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help. She'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no, I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that, as if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else, someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom, peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second, I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here, shit?" Chris mumbled. "Shut up," I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark, despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. "Why the fuck are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked eventually. "Aren't we looking for your wife?" He was looking at me like I was a moron. "Let's just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something," Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them and shuddered at the thought. Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction, but fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs, Chris said, gagging. Ben, I think we should go, he called from the hall. I'm getting nauseous. All right. I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door in my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that? Chris mumbled. I tried to tell you she needed help, I said. She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist, he said. You coming or what? I can't stand the smell any. His words died in his throat and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. Christ, I whispered as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least, wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. Lynn, I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that? I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. I love you, Lynn, I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding, I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder, and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. Oh my God, Lynn. You're bleeding, I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. You all right in there? Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. Are you, bleeding? Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. Chris, run! Go! I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. Jesus, Lynn, Chris said. You, playing hide and seek? I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. Move your ass, Chris, I said as quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard, talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word. I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me. Still on the line with 911, I watched the rearview mirror, sure I'd see her there, running after us. But I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "I found you." And a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. Something walks whistling past my house every night at 3:03. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the 2 strange things here: the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The Whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually, it's small things, winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard, the authentic kind. The weather's pretty good and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed, even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the Whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then, the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room, where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again, no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere, and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom, and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good, and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. It came and it went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in across the street from us. The previous owner, Ms. Maddie, passed away at age 105. She'd lived a good, long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who is always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way, he's really nice," Holden shrugged. "Must be a psycho killer then." Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Let's go in my room and play Nintendo." We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever even tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key," he continued, ignoring me. "So does our dad," said Nola. "No," replied Holden. "No, he doesn't." "You saw him do it," I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. "Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain." "So?" I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years, because he knew we took it seriously. "So, after your dad locked up but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom. And on my way, I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds." Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. "You're lying," I said. Holden shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand." "Stay here," I told both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with the whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. "Nola!" I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast, I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look, okay?" I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden?" I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale. It bit his lip so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night. In that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face. A parent's fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think—" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police! Call! The police!" Police. My mom pulled us closer. "Police, police, police, police." "Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back to front, loud, then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then, something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once, or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop," Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it, a soft tap coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back, so loud it was possible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. "Okay," he told us, "it's done." Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room, Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths, and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. "Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies." I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd looked out the window that night. Would I have looked too? To comfort her? To share that burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. I get paid to answer phone calls all day, but I'm only allowed to listen. I wonder how kids get chased by that thing. They can't work at the call center. We've all heard of odd jobs before. Quirky social media gigs, requests from strangers on the internet, sometimes legit, mostly illegal. I want to warn you about my latest venture. The premise is simple, but confusing. You are paid to answer calls, but you can only listen. If you talk back, if you say anything at all, you're done. Curious, so was I. But before I jump in, I want to set the scene for you. There's a lot of ground to cover, but I promise it'll be worth the wait. Let's start with the call center. There's a certain uneasiness in the building. It's not the lights or the computers or the AC rumbling through the white-paneled ceiling. It's deeper than that. A quiet, unnerving buzz. The longer you are here, the easier it gets. But the feeling never quite goes away. It just gets buried, deeper and deeper into that steel case you call your mind. You'd be surprised how many people there are in this office. It's quiet, but it isn't silent. Never silent. If you sit still long enough, if you really listen, you can hear them, the voices, the steady rhythm of desperation, cries, pleas, whispers, screams. They're not loud enough to disturb anyone, just soft enough to make your skin crawl, like a bad feeling you can't place. They're not coming from the workers, they're pouring out of the phones, the never-ending sea of desperate callers ringing in day after day. Every call is different, every voice is different, but the words, the stories, always the same. "Please," they say, "I don't know where I am. Something is outside the door. I need help." But no one responds. No one ever does. 2 cubes down, Martha, that's what I call her, is filling out a crossword. She taps her acrylic nails against her desk like she's typing away at an invisible keyboard. Then there is Debbie. Again, not her name. but she seems like a Debbie. She is tall, brunette, and eating the same cheap parfait she brings in every day. I think it's strawberry flavored. Nobody talks here, not out loud, not unless they still want to work here. We don't wear name tags. We don't introduce ourselves. We don't even wear our own faces. Everyone's assigned a mask, not the sanitary kind, not the Halloween kind either. They're corporate, sleek, smooth, almost artistic. I would describe it as a masquerade-style mask, without the usual glitter and tassels. They start just below the forehead and stop just above the mouth. They say it's part of the experiment. What experiment? Nobody really knows. That's kind of the whole point. We're not here to understand. We're here to follow instructions, answer the call, don't say anything, let them speak, let them scream, let them beg. Just sit there with the phone pressed to your ear and listen until the line goes dead. That's it. That's the job. It seems cheap, gimmicky almost, like we're a part of the latest reality TV series where cameramen are hiding in bushes with ulterior motives. I thought the same at first, but if there is something that doesn't lie, it's money. And lots of it. That's why I'm here. I'm Ariana, 19 years old, college dropout. A few semesters in, then I quit. Way too much debt, too little hope. Credit cards stacked like a tower ready to fall. I spent weeks scouring every corner of the internet for something, anything that could get me back on my feet, even if just for a while. That's when Mabel introduced me to her profession. Mabel was unique. Always dressed sharp, nice car, good career, Chanel bag casually tossed over her shoulder. A very independent woman. She lived in the city, paid her own bills, and did whatever the hell she wanted to. She was fun, serious, and motivating all at once. We have been friends for a while now, but she always kept me at arm's length, sure we would go out and have a nice time together, bond over past relationships and mutual interests. But there was something mysterious about her. She never really talked about her work. I assumed it was drugs or some kind of shady side hustle. It wasn't like her to keep secrets, but when she saw how down on my luck I was, she took pity, handed me a business card, and then, just as quickly, told me she never gave me that card. If anyone asks you, I didn't give you that card. You don't know Mabel and Mabel don't know you, she said sharply. Apparently that was against the company's rules. Nobody can know anyone else who works there. I was confused, but curious. I called the number. A voice answered, cold, mysterious. They asked me 2 questions. Do you break under pressure? Do you know anyone else who works here? I said no and no. That was it. No background check, no references. Didn't even ask to see the resume I carefully prepared for the occasion. They gave me an address and a time. Simple as that. The onboarding was just as strange as everything else. You'd think I was signing up for some military program or a secret government project. Everyone was tight-lipped. No smiling, no small talk. The rules were simple and unsettling. 1. Arrive at the building exactly when your shift starts, not a minute early, not a minute late. 2. Keep your mask on the entire time, no exceptions. 3. Don't identify yourself. Don't try to identify anyone else. 4. Do not respond or speak to the caller on the other end of the line. It felt odd to say the least, but I kept telling myself it was just one big experiment. They're paying for data, not for us to help anyone. We're not really answering calls. We're the product. Being fed to someone or something higher up the chain. That is what the assessors say at least. Assessors are basically glorified managers. People with a flashy degree and people skills that tell you the voices aren't real. That the people on the other end aren't people at all. They're artificial, synthetic. Part of the test and nothing more. Simulations, they say. You're not hurting anyone. It's about resilience, exposure therapy, mental strength. Sure, buddy. I don't know what they are. I refuse to believe they are people. It wouldn't make sense. But they don't act like simulations either. They don't sound fake. They sob. They stutter. They beg for their kids. They talk about the thing outside the closet or the eyes under the bed, or monster outside their window. You sit there, you listen, you grip your pen tighter and tighter until the call drops out, or the screaming stops, or there's that awful sudden silence, like something just grabbed the person out of existence. Then you breathe, you clear your throat, and the phone rings again. You pick up. I've been here 8 months now, not long, but long enough to know the rhythm. This job isn't about smarts or motivation, it's about routine, muscle memory. You have to build your own little rhythm. Listening to terror all day eats at you, breaks you down slowly. I've seen it happen. New masks come in wide-eyed and curious, and by month 2, they're breaking rules or just gone. My routine is pretty straightforward at this point. I get in at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Same elevator, same gray carpet, same cubicle by the fire exit. I don't speak to anyone. It's safer that way. Chatter is dangerous for me and for whoever's already picking up calls. At 7 a.m., my phone activates. The light goes on. Not a ring, never a ring. Just the light. Blue means wait. Red means answer. And when it's red, you answer. You don't greet them. You don't ask questions. You just listen. And what you hear, well, they're always running, always hiding, always being chased by something they can't quite describe. A little boy whispering, saying something is scratching at his door. His mom won't wake up. A woman panting, saying she's in the stairwell. Something is coming up behind her fast, and the police aren't answering her calls anymore. A man with a crushed voice, locked in a closet. He mutters that he hears footsteps pacing back and forth, right outside, stopping every time he breathes. Different voices, same panic. Some of them say they're in a hallway, or a small bedroom, or under a sink. Sometimes they describe this building, the call center. They'll mention glass double doors, or the color of the carpet, or the smell of coffee from a nearby break room. Sometimes they describe the workers. You have a mask, they'll say. Black gloves. I know you. You can help me. Then they scream. We're not supposed to react, not even a twitch. I've gotten pretty good at it. Neutral face, steady hands. A woman once asked me to sing to her while something chewed its way through her front door. I didn't, but I wanted to. It sticks to you, even after the call ends, especially then. We all handle it differently. Food, puzzles, fidgeting, anything to let out the tension. To cope, I sketch what they describe, not out of interest or enjoyment, just release. Macabre, maybe, but it makes the images leave my head a little faster. Dark figures, tall shadows, doorways broken and bloody, a lot of staircases, and then, just when I start to forget, the light turns red again. The first few days were the hardest, but then my first check came in. After just 1 month on the job, I paid off my student loans. That crushing weight finally lifted. I felt like I could breathe again. A month later, I bought my first car, used but reliable. Then, I paid off my credit card debt. For the first time in years, the numbers in my bank account weren't a burden I needed to figure out. Now, I live in a multi-bedroom loft right in the city, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and big windows that let in way too much sunlight. I'm driving the car I used to drool over in magazines, the one I thought I'd never afford. The money washes away the guilt at this point. Synthetic, manufactured guilt. Like a fresh coat of paint covering the grime beneath, except the grime is just as processed as the paint at this point. Maybe that was the point all along. Just an expensive, extravagant experiment. A cold corporate bet that people will do almost anything for the right amount of cash. If it means listening to fake snuff calls for hours on end. That's what I told myself. The calls were just noise. Background static to the paycheck, until I heard something I never expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was halfway through my shift, eyes drifting between the crossword puzzle I'd started yesterday and the dull glow of my screen. I was a little hungover, my head still fuzzy from last night's bad decisions. Maybe that's why I was so caught off guard. Maybe that is why I made this horrible mistake. The phone turned red. I picked up instinctively, my eyes still fixed on the crossword puzzle. Hello? Is anyone there? I need help. The voice was faint but unmistakable. It was her, Mabel. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Thought maybe I'd picked up my personal phone by mistake. My heart started to hammer. "Mabel," I whispered before I could stop myself. The room was quiet. Not just the usual quiet of the call center, but something heavier, thicker. Like the room was holding its breath. I felt eyes on me, dozens of masked faces turned in my direction, watching, waiting. I felt my face go red as hot embarrassment washed over me. I ducked my head below my cubicle wall, phone still pressed to my ear. Shit, I was done. Then Mabel spoke again. "Wait, Ariana?" I wanted to hang up, but something stopped me. I just didn't understand. Why was Mabel on the line? I've heard hundreds of simulated voices plead and beg for a response. I never imagined it could sound like someone you know. I was already reaching to hang up. She said something strange. Something unexpected. "Oh no, 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 no," she stammered, voice trembling with confusion. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. This wasn't the Mabel I knew. Then she started laughing. Not the light, friendly laugh I remembered. A manic, broken laugh. It didn't stop. I slammed the phone down. I spun around, heart racing, and there she was, a member of HR standing just at the edge of my cubicle. Black mask, notepad in hand, expression unreadable. She motioned for me to follow. No words, just a slow, deliberate walk toward her office. I sat down in the stiff plastic chair across from her desk, my mind still reeling. The call played on a loop in my head. The voice, the laugh, the way it sounded exactly like Mabel. I couldn't stop shaking. "You broke the rules, yes?" she asked flatly, scribbling in her notepad without looking up. "Yes, but you understand this means you are terminated from the call center, correct?" She cut me off with such finality, like it was scripted, like she was reciting lines from a procedure manual. "I recognized her," I said. "The voice. I thought I picked up my own phone by accident. I thought maybe it wasn't even..." That made her pause. She looked up for the first time. Her eyes were sharp behind the mask, almost disappointed. Or was it fear? "You thought what?" It sounded like someone I knew, a friend of mine. She didn't write anything down now, just stared at me. "When you first applied to this job, you answered 2 questions. Do you remember them?" I hesitated. My stomach turned. They asked if I was good under pressure, and if I knew anyone who worked here. "And how did you answer?" "No, I said no to both." She stared a moment longer, then slowly ripped a sheet of paper from her pad and slid it across the desk. "You are hereby terminated from this experiment. You can collect your final check at the location printed on this slip. You've also been granted a severance equivalent to 1 month's salary." I blinked at her. "Wait, that's all?" She didn't respond. Just went back to typing. Like I wasn't there anymore. No explanation, no follow-up about the call, no mention of what I heard, just a polite termination and a severance bonus. I grabbed the paper without reading it and stormed out, past the rows of silent masked employees, past the flickering overhead lights, and out into the daylight. I was halfway to my car when I realized I hadn't even removed my mask. I didn't look back. I felt everything over the next few days. Sadness, anger, confusion, like my body kept going through the motions, but my mind was stuck on a loop. That voice on the other end of the call, the thing that sounded like Mabel. I didn't know what I was supposed to believe anymore. On the second day, I caved and called her, straight to voicemail. That was weird. We were supposed to hang out next weekend, maybe grab drinks and vent about the call center. Mabel never ghosted me, not even when she was sick or pissed or going through it. Something was off. By the third day, I decided I needed to get out of the house, clear my head. The address they gave me for my severance package wasn't far, so I drove out. It led me to a hotel, one of those upscale downtown places with giant flower arrangements and staff that wore gloves. I didn't even see a front desk, just a wall of private mailboxes near the back. The code they gave me worked. The lock clicked open, and inside was a check, neatly folded like it had just been printed. I left and crossed the street to the parking garage where I'd left my car. As I reached the elevator, I paused. There was someone standing on the sidewalk a little ways down, right outside the garage entrance. Big blonde hair, fur coat, tall boots. Mabel? I stepped forward without thinking. Just a few feet, enough to get a better look. And that's when I saw it wasn't her. Not really. The thing looked like Mabel if she'd been made from melting wax. Too tall, limping slightly. Her skin hung off her face in folds, sagging like old leather. Her mouth was slack. Her eyes, God, her eyes. Two hollow pits ringed with tiny, sharp teeth. Her hands were worse. Loose skin, twisted fingers bent at angles that didn't make sense, and yet people kept walking past her like she wasn't there. They moved around her, avoided bumping into her like she had a presence. She took up space, but no one looked, not directly. They didn't see her, not really. If they did, they would have been as terrified as I was. The elevator behind me dinged and the doors opened. I ran inside, slammed the closed door button with shaking fingers. As the doors slid shut, I heard footsteps on the concrete. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Too close. I didn't look. I didn't want to see her again. The elevator dropped me off a few floors up. I got in my car and drove. Fast. Too fast. Every red light felt like a trap. Every time I glanced out my window, I expected to see her there on the sidewalk, moving along in slow, rhythmic motion like a snail wearing human skin. I called a few friends on the way home, just to hear voices. I didn't tell them what I saw. Didn't want to sound insane. But I felt insane. All those desperate calls I've been ignoring. Month after month of people screaming and crying and begging, and now it's like the floodgates have opened. Everything's pouring in at once. Maybe I was having a breakdown. That's what I kept telling myself. Listening to pain and anguish every day will do that to you. I just needed rest, some air, maybe a little trip. I had money now, enough to disappear for a few days, clear my head. And if I still didn't feel right afterward, I'd find a therapist. God knows I probably needed one anyway. I took a detour from my apartment elevator to stroll through the lobby. I wanted to grab a few snacks from the shop beside the front desk before settling in for the night. I needed a bottle or two of something strong to drown out the sadness from my termination from the call center. I was crossing the front desk when I caught sight of something in the corner of my eye. I turned, and there it was again. Mabel. Walking toward me from the lobby entrance. The sight gave me chills, but that feeling passed quickly. I felt steadier after the drive, more level-headed. I wasn't afraid. I was annoyed. This wasn't real. It had to be some elaborate prank or a figment of my imagination. Either way, it couldn't hurt me. I just needed to prove it to myself. I looked around. Everyone else was just walking past. I held my hands out, desperate. Really? Nobody else is seeing this? I took a few deep breaths and started toward it. "Hey, sir, why are you following me?" I called out. The thing didn't say anything, just kept lurching forward. I stopped a few feet in front of it. The smell hit me first, sour, rotten. I winced at the sight of the bloated figure writhing and convulsing under its cheap Mabel disguise. "Did you hear me? This isn't funny, creep. I'm going to get security." Chomp. A mouth. It tore open from the thing's stomach and bit off the finger I was waving at its chest. Just like that. Gone. I staggered back, screaming, clutching the bloody stump where my finger used to be. It kept limping forward. I screamed louder, begging for help. No one looked. No one even paused. I turned and bolted toward the stairs, blood dripping behind me. I was halfway up when I heard the stairway entrance slam open. It was coming. I reached my floor and sprinted down the hall, fumbled my key out of my purse with trembling, bloody hands, got the door open, locked it behind me. I backed away until my spine hit the wall at the other end of the apartment. I pulled my phone out and started dialing 911 with my good hand. Ringtone, then silence. No connection. I checked my service, full bars. This didn't make any sense. I called friends, family, my hairstylist. Nothing. No ringtone. Just silence. I cursed and rushed to the peephole. Nothing out there. Not yet. Just a wide, empty hallway. Blood was getting everywhere. I could feel my heartbeat in my hand from all the pain and swelling. I stumbled into my bedroom, wrapped my finger to stop the bleeding, and popped a few painkillers. Once that was taken care of, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Tried to get online. Email, social media, anything. Blank screen. No connection. I sat down and cried. I didn't understand what was happening. Something was wrong. Not just with that thing in the hallway. Not just with me. Reality itself was broken. No one could hear me. No one could reach me. No one cared. I was isolated, trapped, food for something that wore my friend's skin. Maybe that was all that was left of her. Then, it was here. I heard a few limping footsteps outside the door. The light underneath the front door was stifled by something large standing outside it. I held my breath, waiting, but nothing happened. It just sat there, doing nothing. I grabbed a knife and waited. It was bound to come in at some point, but it didn't. Hours passed. It was well into the night and the shadow was still there. It didn't make sense. I fumbled with my phone. I needed to get in contact with someone. I knew it was futile, but I had to try again. But then I heard something. Not from the phone, from the door. It was Mabel. "Hey, Ariana, I'm here. I need your help." I didn't move. I didn't speak. It was her voice, but it sounded wet, guttural, like it was her whispering through the mouth of a corpse. "Don't ignore me. Say something. Anything. I need to know you're okay." It was monotone, no concern in its voice. I carefully walked to my bedroom. Then, a loud bang. "Don't walk away from me, Ariana. Talk to me." The voice was deeper now, less Mabel, more something else. I pushed my door closed with a soft click and covered my ears as a barrage of loud bangs broke out across the apartment. I heard them everywhere. My door, the ceiling above, the windows facing the city below. The sound passed after an hour. My body was so tired at this point, partly exhaustion, partly the blood loss from my missing finger. I barricaded my door, clutched my phone, and rested my eyes in the empty bed. I slept maybe an hour or two before something woke me. I sprang up and looked toward the bedroom door. The shadow was under my bedroom door now. It had somehow gotten into my apartment. It was standing there the same way it had outside, but now it was here. I realized I couldn't escape this thing. Whatever it was going to get me. Slowly, but surely. It had no issue entering my apartment. It would have no problem breaking into my room. Maybe it was toying with me. Maybe it enjoyed the chase. I felt panic wash over me. "Leave me alone," I screamed. I heard a soft laugh break out just outside the door. I returned to my phone, started calling everyone in my contact list again. Silence every time. Like the world outside my apartment building just vanished. Then I realized something. I realized the silence didn't mean the calls were failing. They were going through. Every time. No ringing, no static, just quiet. Someone on the other end was always there, always listening. It was the call center. Every call I made was routed straight back to the center. I only figured it out because of a tiny, almost imperceptible sound, one you'd miss if you weren't desperate enough to listen for it. A spoon scraping the bottom of a plastic parfait cup. Debbie. From work. "Debbie?" I said into the phone. No response. Of course not. Debbie wasn't her name, just the one I gave her. None of us knew each other's names. That's how they designed it. Masks, code numbers, shift schedules that barely overlapped. "Hey, I know you. Well, not know you, but we work together. Please, just say something. I think you can help me." Still nothing. And that's when it hit me. They wouldn't answer. Not ever. They couldn't. We don't speak. Not to them. It didn't matter what I said, how much I begged and cried. And could I really blame her? I ignored hundreds of calls just like this. That is when I broke. I started laughing. Loud, cracked, borderline hysterical. The same kind of laugh I heard from Mabel. That day she realized the truth. That she was calling the same people she sat next to every day. That none of us said a word. Not when it mattered. It was real. All of it. Real people. Real demons. God, those poor people. Men, women, and children. The poor children. The creature outside went quiet during my breakdown. Maybe it enjoyed my pain. Maybe it was hoping I'd walk out, still broken, right into its jaws. Once the laughter died and I steadied my breathing, I felt a strange mental clarity. Could have been the painkillers or sleep deprivation. Either way, I had an idea. If they respond, the creature moves on. That was my theory. I never got confirmation from Mabel, but she had tried it. She screamed into the phone until someone broke the rules, and the thing left her alone. At least, that was the hope. I needed to get someone to answer, to break the rules, like Mabel did, like I did. I racked my brain for anything I knew about the people I worked with, something, anything that could crack their armor. Then it hit me. Martha. She was always working during my shift, the one with the crossword puzzles and clacking acrylics. The only reason she came to mind was because I knew something about her I shouldn't. We do our best to hide our identities, but every now and then something slips out. A phrase, the flash of a text on your personal phone, the hint of a tattoo. Her mistake was much more telling and easy to forget. One day I saw a brochure sticking out of her purse, assisted living facility. I recognized the name. My mom had looked into it for my grandfather once. Nice place, private rooms, big windows, expensive. Probably why Martha took the job. I grabbed the phone, started dialing random numbers, cold calling the call center over and over, same silent line, same hollow wait. I listened for her. I waited for the familiar tap of nails on the cheap plastic desk. Fast, plasticky little clicks. Call, hang up, nothing. Was Martha even on rotation today? I started to feel hopeless. Outside the room, the door handle started to twitch, a soft rattle like someone trying to figure out the lock. It would be in here soon. Then, I heard it, the clacking of nails. I prepped the script in my mind. I had one chance. "Hello?" I said in the calmest voice I could manage. No answer. I take another shaky breath before continuing. "I'm calling because your family member at Woodbrooks is in the middle of a situation here." I hoped this was the right angle. During my time working there, every call was frantic, desperate, just like me. But I couldn't show it. Not if I expected this to work. Nobody at the call center would expect something so calm and collected. The clacking stopped. I had her attention. Now I needed to drive it home. "Sorry to call this line. Someone at the call center said it was your work line. I just need to confirm some information. Let's start with your last name." I bit my tongue as the door began to unlock. It creaked open slowly. The barricade of furniture slid across the floor like it was a pile of empty boxes. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. What stood there wasn't wearing Mabel's skin anymore. That was gone, sloughed off like wet clothing. What remained was something raw, a bundle of dark flesh, tentacles and mouths writhing in slow, deliberate motion, snapping, smacking, clicking wetly against each other. They turned toward me slowly. The bundle of wiry flesh writhed towards me in unison. I closed my eyes and tried to keep my voice level. "Ma'am, this is an emergency. If I don't get a directive right now, I will need to call 911. I felt warmth descending upon my face, 100 little mouths breathing on my skin in anticipation. Then, she spoke. "Is my mom okay?" she asked. The sound of her voice felt like a lifeline being caught in the middle of the ocean. I opened my eyes. To my surprise, the thing was gone. I caught just the tip of a black tendril vanishing around the corner toward my front door. I grabbed the phone again. "Listen, this isn't Woodbrook. I used to work with you. Something's coming for you. The call center, it intercepts your calls. You need to get someone to respond." The line went dead. I stood there, useless. I didn't even know her name, didn't know what she looked like. And yet, I may have just sentenced her to a fate worse than what happened to me. Or Mabel. I felt sick. I didn't leave my apartment for weeks. I needed time to process everything. I'm in a better headspace now. You can thank a lot of expensive therapy for that. I got into this job for the money. I didn't care about the calls. I told myself they were fake, but that was a lie. The truth is, I was desperate. I don't know if I would have taken the job if I'd known what was really going on. Honestly, I probably still would have. That's what scares me. But now, I have a new purpose, a better one. I'm going to end the call center. I don't know how yet, but I'm working on it. I owed it to Mabel and Martha. I don't care if I go broke, if I lose everything. There are more important things than money in this life, and this place is going to learn that the hard way. Until then, you've been warned. Don't accept a job from the call center that ignores desperate people, real people, scared people being chased by a real threat. I managed to make it out, but most people won't be so lucky. Most people will be hiding in their homes, crying, pleading, begging a bunch of corporate morons in masks to save them from something truly evil. But if you already work in a place like the call center, it isn't too late. If you can help, help. Don't sit idly by and listen to injustice. Don't let the corporations tell you it's all synthetic garbage. Use your own judgment. Be kind. Be curious. You may just save someone's life. There's only 5 of us on this camping trip. We keep counting 6. We only brought 1 person tents with us, but we could squeeze 2 if we tried. That way no one would be alone at night. There were bright flashes of red in the sky. It's as if someone was waving around a flare light from space, faint but noticeable. We all made UFO jokes and laughed as we nailed our tents into the ground. I knew for sure that there were 5 of us. We've all been friends since early middle school, and we're celebrating our high school graduation with this getaway camping trip. The flashes of red must have stopped randomly as we made conversation while fixing up our tents. Dave managed to put his tent together the fastest and told us he was going to find some branches for the fire. I remember how he had worked with me at the local gas station last year. We used to do the night shift together, and it had made working at a desolate gas station much more fun than it was supposed to be. There was also Eric in the corner, still reading his tent manual, fidgeting with his signature round glasses. I wasn't as close with Eric as I was with the others, but I still remember sitting with him in math class and copying his homework one time. Ava was also there talking with Sally, my cousin. Both had decided to team up and work on one tent at a time. I also have clear memories of them, hanging around at school in our usual places. In fact, I even knew Ava's younger brother, as he used to beg to go with us wherever we went. I bring all this up because I'm sure that there were 5 of us, including me, and that I knew everyone in the group. So Dave had went to get some branches as we pulled out some foldable chairs and set them up around the fire pit. I remember feeling uneasy as the sun set, and darkness began to consume the forest. The shadows of trees elongated around us as the minutes ticked by. Eric went to get a flashlight from his bag, while we wondered what was taking Dave so long. He appeared soon after, the harsh rustling sounds of the bushes signifying his return. We were all buried in our chairs at this point, covered by our jackets. The temperature had dropped quickly, and a slight breeze was beginning to pick up. "Geez, you guys weren't even bothered to pull out a chair for me," Dave said as he arranged all the branches in the pit. We had set up 5 chairs around the fire. I tried to rationalize the situation, but no matter how hard I focused, my head felt like it was underwater. I had perfect clarity up until that moment. But when I tried to focus on why 5 chairs were occupied, when Dave hadn't sat down yet, my head seemed to just stop working, as if something was reaching in and pulling out my thoughts. Instinctually, I felt even more uneasy now, and I had placed why. The whole forest had gone dead silent. I looked around at the faces of the others and could tell that they had felt the same. Eric was fidgeting with his fingers, trying to scan around the group and spot the extra person, but it was futile. I scanned every face, each etched in worry and frowning in frustration, except for, "It's all right, I'll get the chair myself," Dave said, breaking the silence and somewhat alleviating the tension. I got up and offered to help him. He looked into my eyes and nodded knowingly. We headed away from the fire pit towards the tents, but I kept my eyes glued on our group. "How many people are here?" I whispered to Dave as he looked around and realized that we had indeed only packed 5 chairs. In fact, every person had brought with them their own chair. They were heavy to carry, and we wouldn't bring any extra needlessly. "There's 5, right? I mean, there's 5 chairs," Dave replied. His voice wavered as he spoke. "No, I just think maybe one of us forgot our chair," I said. My mind was struggling to address the issue head-on and now sought to find rational excuses instead. I didn't quite feel in control of my thoughts. It felt like swimming in a dream, and if I tried to force myself to think about who the sixth person was, my head would begin to throb. "Yeah, that sounds about right, actually," Dave said, relaxing and heading back to the group. When we walked back to the fire pit and circle of chairs, 2 chairs were empty, one for me and one for Dave. Everything was adding up now, even though we all agreed it wasn't before. Sally suggested we were all probably tired after the long hike to get here and probably just needed some sleep. She could have been right. We were all sleep-deprived from waking up very early today to make it on time. Ava brought out the drinks. The whole 6-pack was emptied. We all moved closer to the crackling fire for warmth as we took sips from our cans and reminisced on memories of last year. Ava was in the middle of telling us about that one time she was home alone with weird things happening in her house when I got these sudden chills, despite the pleasant warmth of the fire. What felt cozy and safe moments ago felt wrong now, all because I realized that there was a crucial detail I missed. "Who started the fire?" I asked, completely interrupting Ava in the middle of her story and breaking everyone else's immersion. Everyone looked momentarily annoyed until they realized they had no answer. Once again, I scanned the faces staring back at me, all barely illuminated by the light from the fire, all familiar and pale from fear. "Wasn't it you, Dave?" Eric asked. Dave shook his head. "I think the person standing behind Jenny did it," Sally said, looking over at me. I whipped my head around so quickly it hurt. My heart was pounding in my ears. There was nothing behind me except for the encompassing darkness of the woods. Staring at those tall, dark trees behind me made me feel exposed. I felt like a lost bird in a vast field. "Wait, I don't know," Sally said. Her eyes had gone wide and she was shaking visibly. She continued to look around frantically as Ava moved over to her, placing her hands on her shoulders and trying to calm her down. "I think we should leave this place," Ava stuttered. "Yeah, something just doesn't feel right, but I can't put my finger on it," Dave said. "But it's so dark out in the forest now, we'd probably get lost if we leave now." Someone else said, "Yeah, I think we should stay the night and leave as soon as we can tomorrow." Eric agreed. I tried to protest, but realized Eric was right. The woods harbored an oppressive darkness within which navigation would be near impossible. "Let's not sleep in our separate tents just to be safe," Sally said. We all agreed. We only brought one-person tents with us, but we could squeeze 2 if we tried. That way no one would be alone at night. Following this conversation, we all got up and made our pairs. I went with Dave and Sally like always went with Ava. Eric kept complaining that he didn't have a pair, but we reassured him he did. He wouldn't accept it. I feel like at some point we all realized that there were only 5 of us, and suddenly we were all huddling up in the middle of the clearing. "Why do we keep thinking there are 6 of us here?" Eric asked. Sweat was dripping down his face despite the cold. We had nearly left him all alone on his own, under the assumption that there was another person. My stomach turned as I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to mentally recap everyone here. My head throbbed, but I kept pushing it. "There's me, Dave, Eric, Ava, Sally, and..." I was pointing at each of them as I said the name. I retched and emptied the contents of my stomach on the ground when I got past Sally. The left side of my head felt like there was a knife stuck in it. My vision was blurry. Dave held me up to stop me from collapsing, and we all wordlessly started to move towards the tents as someone put the fire out. Dave helped me into a tent while the 4 outside discussed what to do. I could only focus on snippets of the conversation as the excruciating pain beating against my skull came and went in waves. Sally had the brilliant idea of arranging 3 tents together, so their openings faced together at right angles in a sort of U shape, so we could sleep as close as possible and also limit the entrance to our tents. Dave was about to go to help as they worked outside, but I clutched his hand and asked him to stay with me. The tents took some time to arrange. I started to feel a bit better once everyone got settled into their tents. A quick head count confirmed there were 5 of us. Eric would have to sleep in his tent alone, but he was more comfortable with it since all the tents were very close now. Looking back now, I think he was just trying to put a brave face on for us. I regret that moment deeply, letting him sleep in his tent alone. He was always less integrated in our group and knew that none of us would pair with him. Just before going to bed, we all agreed to leave as soon as the sun rose in the morning. I remember taking one last look outside the tent into the forest before trying to fall asleep. The wind had picked up and the tree branches were swaying gently. Beyond our clearing was just pure darkness. It felt like the trees were closing in on me. With the faint moonlight illuminating our clearing, I turned my head to look over at the two tents we had left out and saw someone standing next to them. Despite the circumstances, sleep came quickly and easily. Ava's shrill scream woke me up in the middle of the night. Dave and I ripped our tent door open to find Sally and Ava looking into Eric's tent. We pushed them aside. Eric's sleeping bag was rolled up. He was still inside it, his head in the center, face contorted in utter agony. The rest of his body rolled around it with the blue fabric now dripping with dark blood. Dave zipped up the door of the tent. Ava was in shock. Her eyes had become glassy and unfocused. Sally was shaking her repeatedly, tears streaming down her face. Dave picked up his torch and yelled at us to get up and run. We left the campsite behind and entered the trail we had come from. The five of us huddled together, Dave leading in the front as he cast his weak flashlight over the path so we could see it. All we had to help us get through this 2-hour trail was a small white circle of light. Even the moon failed to illuminate our surroundings through the dense foliage. Ava tripped and fell, twisting her ankle. We came to a stop. Someone said they knew how to splint it so we could keep going. They dragged her into the woods instead. It happened too quickly for any of us to process. Sally was about to run after Ava when Dave held her back. She struggled and managed to free herself, running into the trees to follow the echoes of Ava's screams. I was about to run after her, but Dave held me by the shoulders and shook me hard. "We need to get out of here, Jenny, please," he said. I hesitated but jolted into motion again when Sally's voice was cut off abruptly. She had been calling out Ava's name as she ran after her. Dave and I continued to run down the trail, trying to get to our car so we could get out of here. There was nothing we could do. At some point, there were 3 of us running on the trail, Dave and I shoulder to shoulder while someone followed us closely behind. "Dave, who's behind us?" I gasped. My heart was threatening to burst through my ribcage and my legs burned. He turned to look at me. Confusion transformed into fear on his face and then into rage. "You keep running," he told me as he produced a pocket knife from his pants. He handed me the car keys, which I nearly dropped. Then he turned around suddenly and jumped at whoever was behind us. I continued to run in fear as the sounds of a struggle grew behind me. I tripped and tumbled through the trail for what felt like hours. I didn't allow myself to stop. I almost cried when the trail ended and I walked out into the familiar car park. Not wasting a second, I ran to the car and started it up, accelerating out of that forest and onto the highway within mere seconds. I'm typing this post out at a rest stop. My phone has finally regained service and I've called 911 to try and explain the situation. I don't think they believe my version of events, but they sent a car my way regardless. As I wait, the sun is finally starting to rise. After I hit the post button on this, I'm going to check why the person in my backseat has been so silent the whole time.